Hi, this is TV's dad, subbing for TV's Colin for Studio Kaiju. Today we have a pleasure to speak with Mr. Herschell Gordon Lewis, who is known as a filmmaker and as an author of a series of marketing books. I'd like to talk to Mr. Lewis about his career and see what he has to say. Mr. Lewis, you wrote a series of books about marketing and about the power of words and so forth. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. You see, the idea here in things such as advertising and marketing is not necessarily the expenditure of money. If you watch television, for example, and you see automobile commercials or commercials for detergents or for beauty aids, you sense a great sameness about this stuff where there's no individuality, there's no real rationale to buy. Many people in the advertising business simply describe. My superimposition on that is to cause them to perform a positive act as the direct result of having seen or heard the words. And that's what I regard myself really as a wordsmith. Example, one word that I think is always superfluous in advertising is the word available. If you analyze that word, it's more of a negative than a positive. I see ads such as, for all your insurance needs. Needs as a noun can be dispensed with because what it says is, I don't know what you want, so write my ad for me. And it's little bits and pieces like that. Instead of saying you must, you say you should, because you don't want, in today's marketplace, the recipient of your message to feel that he's being or she is being preached to. It's as simple as that. So over a period of years, under battle conditions, I have amassed a series of rules. My 31st book is due out in September. That's probably going to be my last one. I'm out of things to say. But I've written books on every medium, both print and television and email and so on, and fundraising. There's the most competitive marketing business in the world is fundraising. And a lot of people in the various facets of these businesses are only concerned with a client's budget. They are not concerned with the actual results. So they back into results by spending a lot of money. When you sell direct, that is, if I run an email campaign or a direct mail campaign, you can keep score immediately. And this is the one area in which a pygmy can attack a giant because you are as big as your piece of mail. You don't need a big retail store. You don't need a gigantic amount of backing. All you need is salesmanship. And that's my personal philosophy of marketing.
So how did you come to this philosophy? What brought you to this?
Well, the difference between making movies and selling things by either mail or email or whatever is not that great, because in each case you want somebody to perform a positive act. You want somebody to either buy the DVD or go to a theater. And how do you do that? And I look at the campaigns for some of the major company movies. They don't even know how to title a movie anymore. But certainly some of their campaigns are stupefying in their flatness. I began my personal career as a school teacher. I taught English literature and the humanities at a college in the United States. And from there, I simply gravitated into areas of marketing almost by accident, as many careers are shaped by accident. At one point, when I was shooting some television commercials as an advertising person, the fellow who owned the little film studio in which we shot the commercials told me he was looking for a partner. And I wound up buying a half interest in that little film studio. So that's where the worlds collided. And from that point forward, I was in two separate fields. And subsequently, making horror movies, I was glad I was in both fields because I had no notion that we would wind up with having started a movement.
And that led to you being nicknamed the Godfather of Gore. You worked from 1960 to 1972, making all manner of exploitation films or even children's films with, I believe, the Magic Land of Mother Goose.
And Jimmy the Boy Wonder.
Yeah. Jimmy the Boy Wonder. And going all the way across the spectrum to the Gore Girls, The Wizard of Gore, which I believe was the last film from that period. Was there any plan? Did you just sort of decide horror was the way to go, or just whatever felt right, or how were the movies decided?
I decided horror was the way to go because that was the one genre of motion picture that the major companies weren't making. So I felt if it did succeed at all, I would have that category to myself. And for a number of years I did. But as you may be aware, I'm sure you are, the motion picture business has no secrets. On a Sunday night now, you know what movies have opened and failed and opened and succeeded. So then it took a little longer, but the word got out. And when I found that the majors were starting to make my kind of movie with assets I couldn't match, budget, name stars, and a distribution network implicit in their whole operation, I felt it was time to get out, which I did. I had the other career. And it was only a couple of years ago when somebody asked me to direct Blood Feast 2 that of course I'll direct. If someone wants to start shooting a movie tomorrow morning, I'm here.
Okay. So now they're starting to remake some of your films.
Yes, they are. They've remade 2000 Maniacs. They call it 2001 Maniacs. And then someone has just remade The Wizard of Gore. And according to this fellow over here, Jimmy Maslin, who now owns all my own movies, so he's negotiating with someone to remake She-Devils on Wheels.
That was yours?
Yeah, the Female Motorcycle Gang. That was my movie.
I should have known that. I'm sorry.
Never apologize for not knowing one of my movies. Be glad.
Actually, I enjoyed 2000 Maniacs. I remember watching that in the drive-in, and as opposed to, which for me at the time was at the height of the slasher, early 80s kind of thing, it was kind of a relief because it wasn't just how do you put a knife in some kid. There was some story going on. I enjoyed that.
I'm glad to hear you say that because, as you may or may not know, of all the movies I've made, 2000 Maniacs is my personal favorite.
Really? Because I sort of think of it as like a bizarre version of Brigadoon.
That's what it was. I had never heard of Brigadoon at the time, although folklore since, you see, has linked the two together because there is a common thread. A community coming back to life 100 years later. But ours was geared toward the United States Civil War. 100 years after that war was over, this little town which they wiped out comes back to life, and so we're going to get even.
So where did you, how did you innovate your things like your makeup effects, and where did you find your talent?
Where did I find my what?
Your acting talent. Not your talent, but
no.
Where did you find the
actors? I knew the word, but I'm just wondering, what is that? It's like saying, who wrote your script? And I'll say, who wrote my what? We would pick up talent. You see, I never had a great regard for name talent. I felt that was a budgetary factor that I couldn't really compete with. So we often would find people who acted on the stage who had to have talent to be able to do that. We would find people who were physically attractive because that brings people into the theater too. The effects were at the outset totally primitive. Today you can walk into any magic store and get an arm and a hand.
They're selling them here.
They're selling them here. Okay, but what I would have given for one of those, we were using department store mannequins. And once again, this is the evolution of something, and I'll take some credit for that trend having started.
Let's see. So would you say that these movies were a labor of love or a labor of I can make a living off of this?
Combination. You see, making movies, it's like having malaria. It's in your blood, and you think you're over it, but it's lurking in the system. And proof is Blood Feast 2, which we shot a couple of years ago. I never thought I'd make Blood Feast 2. And now I'm sitting with a script called Grim Fairy Tales, which I do want to make. And as soon as a producer shows up and says, yes, let's make that, bam, I'm ready.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting talking to you. I've really enjoyed it.
The pleasure was mine. I like the questions.
You have a nice day. Thank you.